Hi, and welcome to The Lowest Crime, the podcast where we talk about some of the most devastating and shocking criminal cases from the Netherlands. I'm Alina, and in today's episode, we'll be looking at a case that gripped the country in horror. The 2019 killings of 3 innocent dog walkers. Over the course of just a few days, 3 people, all of them out walking their dogs, were brutally murdered in random, motiveless attacks. Before we begin, please note that this episode contains descriptions of extreme physical violence, mental illness, and the murder of 3 innocent people, so listener discretion is strongly advised. And as always, I try my very best to bring you all the known facts, but I am just an amateur podcast creator, so there's always a chance of me making a mistake. This is the story of Atsuko, Diny, and Frans. 3 lives ended in broad daylight, and the long trip to justice in the case of Thijs H. It is Saturday the 4th of May, 2019. The afternoon is calm in the Scheveningen Sabushes, the wooded parklands tucked inside the Hague. Just after 3, the peace is broken when walkers discover a woman lying motionless beside her cargo bicycle. It is 56-year-old Atsuko. Nearly every day, she could be found here faithfully walking her 2 dogs. One of them, Lucy, is now moving anxiously near her motionless body. The other dog, Max, partially paralyzed, remains in the cargo bike that had made it possible for him to come along on their walk. Atsuko lived for her animals. Gentle, kind, and devoted. She gave them everything. But now, she lies still. Police officers arrived on the scene to check for a pulse, but there is none. Her body is already cold. They see multiple bloodstains on her clothing and a cut across her face. This is no accident. The forensic examination later reveals the sheer violence of the attack. Atsuko sustained 3 incised wounds and 30 stab wounds. The knife pierced her sternum, her left lung, her heart, and her skull. 10 of the wounds inflicted to her head, torso, and left upper arm caused catastrophic damage, perforating the brain, lungs, and heart. The brutality was such that her left little finger had been severed. Her death was the result of massive blood loss, oxygen deprivation, organ failure, and even the inhalation of blood. In this quiet corner of where she felt at home, Atsuko's life had been ended with extraordinary violence. For those first hours, there was no explanation, only the shocking image of a kind woman, her loyal dogs close by, and the grim certainty that a crime had been committed. Just 3 days after the killing in Scheveningen, it happened again. It was Tuesday, May 7, 2019, just before noon. The Brunssum, a vast nature reserve in South Limburg, is filled with its usual rhythm. Dog owners walk the sandy paths, exchanging greetings, letting their animals run free. It is the kind of place where everyone knows each other. But that sense of safety is about to be shattered. At 11:53 a.m., walkers discover the lifeless body of a woman laying face down on the trail. Later, she'll be identified as Diny, 63 years old, a grandmother from the area. Her golden retriever T stays close by, refusing to leave his owner's side. The forensic investigation would later show the extent of her injuries. She had suffered 4 stab wounds to her torso. She also bore 6 incised wounds to her head. 2 of the stab wounds to her torso alone were fatal, causing massive internal bleeding and respiratory collapse. As police and bystanders gather at the scene, the horror only deepens. At 12:16 p.m., barely 20 minutes later, another walker calls out, "There's another body." Not far from where Diny was found lies a man on his back. This is Frans, 68 years old, from Hunpook. His dog Kira stands over him. The autopsy revealed that Frans too had suffered stab wounds, 10 in total. 8 penetrations and 1 through-and-through wound, along with 4 incised wounds. Unlike the women, he bore clear defensive injuries, showing that he had tried to fight back. 3 of the stab wounds to his torso proved fatal. Both chest cavities, both lungs, and the right side of his diaphragm were pierced, causing heavy internal bleeding and catastrophic respiratory failure. The combination of blood loss and loss of lung function led to his death. In just 30 minutes, 2 innocent lives were taken in broad daylight in a place where they should have been safe. First Atsuko in the Hague, and now Diny and Frans on the Punu. 3 dog walkers murdered while doing something as ordinary as taking their pets out for a walk. 3 lives ended without warning, with brutal violence and no apparent motive. On Tuesday, May 7th, only hours after the killings on the Brunssum, a slim young man walked into the Mondrian mental health clinic, Valor, in Maastricht. It was 5:15 p.m. His name was Thijs H. On his hands and his clothing was blood. He admitted that he had been wandering for hours on the Bruna, the very place where 2 dog walkers had just been murdered. For the clinic staff, there was no doubt something was terribly wrong. Thijs was not a stranger to them. He had already been treated at Milan. In recent months, he had fallen deeper into despair. He had even attempted suicide, for which he was taking antidepressants. Now, standing in front of them, he was agitated, unstable, and bloodstained. And yet, bound by medical confidentiality, the staff did not immediately notify the police. They admitted him in the high intensive care ward, a closed unit, but not solitary confinement. That evening, Thijs stacked chairs in the courtyard, climbed a wall, and escaped. Security cameras were there, but no one stopped him. Later that night, his parents brought him back to the clinic. Again, he was admitted. Again, he was left to walk freely inside the ward. By the next morning, Wednesday, May 8th, at 9 o'clock, he slipped away once more. This time, he triggered the fire alarm to create chaos and walked straight out. Only then did the clinic alert the police. Now the manhunt began. That evening around 9:30 p.m., while much of the country was watching the Champions League match, police released a public wanted notice. His first name and initial of his last name, Thijs H, was published along with a photo showing him leaving the clinic. He looked disheveled, with long hair hanging flat along his face, wearing a dark coat, jeans, and black shoes. The suspicion was clear. A man with blood on his hands and clothes admitted that he had been on the Brunn and now escaped twice. He had to be stopped. Until now, he had been unknown to the police. Born in 1992, he had grown up in Brunssum, in the south of Limburg, in a quiet, detached house along the Venom Baccarat, with well-kept gardens and tidy streets. His parents still live there. Thijs had studied cultural anthropology in Leyden, and later started a master's in industrial ecology in Delft. Friends described him as intelligent but quiet. His move to the Hague had seemed like a fresh start, arranged with the help of his parents. But in the weeks before the killings, his behavior had shifted. At the Hoge Raad in Diny, housemates heard loud banging. Thijs kicked in a door, rambling nonsense about a lost key. His hair was messy, his clothes crooked. To his housemates, he no longer seemed like the calm young man that they had first met. He seemed like somebody completely different. And now, only days later, he was the suspect of a nationwide manhunt. On Wednesday, May 8th, at 10:30 p.m., the search ended in Maastricht. Police arrested the 27-year-old. He was held under suspicion of committing the 3 murders, Atsuko, in the and Diny and Frans, on the Brunssum. 3 innocent dog walkers killed in 2 separate attacks, only days apart. But when the investigators tried to question him, Thijs could not explain. He was in turmoil, his mind storming. He had to be sedated before a proper interrogation was even possible. Months later, the case of Thijs H reached the courtroom. On the second day of the substantive hearings, experts from the Pieter Baan Centrum presented their conclusions. After weeks of observation and study of his medical file, they told the judges that Thijs had acted under the grip of a psychosis. Their advice, he should be declared fully unaccountable. If the court followed that advice, a prison sentence would not apply, only compulsory psychiatric treatment, TBS. The experts explained that his psychosis had a long lead-up, but it was never properly recognized by his doctors. Not when he suffered a breakdown in September of 2018, and not even after his suicide attempt in November. He did receive psychiatric treatment at Maastricht. But the psychosis was overshadowed by his other diagnosis: concentration problems, social difficulties, and ADHD. While he stopped taking his antipsychotics, he was indeed prescribed dexamethasone, an ADHD medication that, according to the experts, only worsened his psychotic symptoms. The psychosis must always be the primary diagnosis, one psychiatrist said, otherwise all other diagnoses are doomed to fail. Because of this, they argued the murders could not be attributed to him. Yes, he had killed 3 people, but in a reality that only existed in his mind. When the case of Thijs H finally reached the courtroom, the central question was no longer what had happened. He had confessed to the killings, and the forensic evidence was overwhelming. The question was, how responsible was he truly for his actions? But the families of the victims saw it differently. They came to court to speak directly to Thijs. The husband of Diny broke down in tears. "You destroyed everything, you idiot monster. I hope that you have a mirror in your cell, so you'll see every day that you are a serial killer." Her twin sister turned her anger on both the clinic and his family. "If you protect him like that, you are also to blame to me. I was a twin. Now I'm alone." Thijs, what did you want to find out? What was it like to stab? Did it feel good? Was it as you expected? Thijs looked at her and answered softly, "No." Dean's daughter spoke next. "You didn't just take my mother, you also took my best friend. However long or short you'll be locked up, you will always remain a serial killer." From The Hague, the widower of Atsuko sent his statement through a lawyer. "All I can ask this court is to ensure that no one else will ever feel the pain that I, our families and friends have felt in losing Atsuko." As these words were read, Thijs broke down in tears. "I just wanted to say how terribly sorry I am and that you find justice in this process," he said. The families demanded over €150,000 in damages. Their lawyers stressed that it was possible Ty had exaggerated or even fabricated symptoms of psychosis, drawing on what he had read online. The prosecution, too, was skeptical. They pointed to details that suggested preparation. For instance, how he left his phone behind to avoid being tracked, how he chose his victims carefully, and how he played heavy metal music with violent lyrics to work himself up before the killings. One prosecutor even read out a lyric that he had listened to before the Brunssum killings. "I am chosen, next in line, sent to slaughter all mankind." When asked why he had listened to such music, Ta replied flatly, "To get myself in the mood, I had to gather courage." He insisted that he had been completely confused at the time, following coded orders from what he called the system. "I wish I had never done it," he told the judges. On July 15, 2020, the court in Limburg delivered its judgment. Ta H was found guilty of the murders of Atsuko in the H and Diny and Frans on the Brunnsum. The judges acknowledged that he had been suffering from a psychosis, but they concluded that he was not entirely unaccountable. They believed that he had exaggerated his symptoms and colored his behavior afterwards, influenced by stories he had read about psychosis and medication use. The result was unusual, a sentence that combined 18 years in prison with TBS. The court emphasized that although Ta was mentally ill, he still bore responsibility for his actions. The verdict in 2020 did not end the case. Both Ta and his defense team appealed. In April 2021, the Court of Appeal in Stambos decided that more psychiatric research was necessary. The earlier Pieter Baan Centrum report was already more than a year old, and the Limburg court had deviated from its advice to declare him fully unaccountable. So they ordered a fresh examination by both a psychologist and a psychiatrist. Even the experts who had originally drafted the report would be questioned again. Ty himself told the court that he had appealed because the lower court had made assumptions that were untrue. He said his parents and friends had been treated disrespectfully during the trial, while they had nothing to do with the killings. In the appeal proceedings, his parents, who had previously refused to testify, indicated that they were now willing to give a statement. The hearings unfolded through 2021, and music into 2022, weighing expert reports against the prosecution's arguments. And then, on March 17, 2022, the Court of Appeal delivered its final verdict. This time, the sentence was heavier. Ta H was given 22 years in prison, plus TBS. The judges acknowledged that he suffered from mental illness, but they also pointed to signs of calculation and deliberate action. He had turned off his phone to avoid being traced. He had carefully chosen his victims, sparing some and attacking others. And he had even listened to violent heavy metal music to summon the courage to kill. These elements, the court argued, showed that he had acted with at least some degree of awareness and intent. The ruling meant that under new Dutch rules of early release, Ty would have to serve at least 20 years before being eligible for parole, and only then if his compulsory psychiatric treatment had been successfully completed. Still, the legal process was not yet over. Tyson's lawyers filed for cassation at the Supreme Court, the Hoge Raad. In 2023, the highest court delivered its decision. The Supreme Court upheld the convictions and TBS, but reduced the prison term to 21 years and 10 months due to the case duration. And with that, the long legal battle ended. 3 dogwalkers, Atsuko, Diny, and Frans, had lost their lives in sudden, senseless acts of violence. And Thijs H, once an unassuming student in the H-Brun, would now spend decades behind bars, followed by psychiatric treatment that could in practice last the rest of his life. For the families of Atsuko, Diny, and Frans, no ruling could undo their loss. Their loved ones will never return. But their voices in court, their demands for justice, and their refusal to let the case fade into silence stand as a reminder of the human cost behind the headlines. 3 people gone, 3 families torn apart, and a country left to reckon with the failures that allowed this to happen. And with that, we end today's episode. Thank you all so much for listening. If you found this an interesting episode, please consider leaving a like or a comment, or subscribing to the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.